Hello and welcome to this month's Heart Bunch video. Today we wanted to talk about 3 unregulated substances you might or might not have heard of. So we wanted to talk about this because you might have heard in the news or from friends about products that you can buy at places like gas stations or online. And these substances promise to help curb like a substance use disorder or help you taper off of maybe a drug or a medication, or they are marketed as being able to stop other conditions like anxiety or chronic pain from getting worse. But products like these, we're finding they are unregulated, meaning that they're not researched, they're not tested for safety, and they're not approved by the Food and Drug Administration, which is the agency, the FDA is the agency that monitors foods and medications in the United States. So manufacturers are able to bypass these regulations because they're marketed as dietary supplements. And this is a class of products that the FDA actually cannot inspect. There's a whole law and regulations and rules behind all this stuff that we're not going to get into, but the FDA cannot inspect dietary supplements. One big reason is that these products are included, or they include natural or previously improved ingredients that are considered to be safe. So things like vitamins and minerals and compounds and herbs, like herbal, botanical herbs and things like that. But they can carry risks. So for example, when you put some of these ingredients together, some of them counteract each other. One ingredient might make another one stronger or make it weaker. They can cause allergic reactions in some people. And then the last thing is they could be toxic at high doses. And because they haven't been researched or tested for safety, then there's really no way to know unless, people report these things to the FDA. So we wanted to make you aware of 3 substances that have really been in the news lately that are considered legal, but they are unregulated and they're not exactly what they're cracked up to be. So I'm going to turn it over to Aaron to talk about the first substance.
Thanks, Gabby. The first substance we're going to talk about is kratom or kratom. And this is derived from the leaves of a tree native to Southeast Asia. And it works by binding to opioid receptors in your brain, similar to other opioids, and it can cause opioid-like effects. So kratom is marketed as a herbal supplement, and they are legally sold, but there are no approved uses in the US for like treatment. And many people report using it to manage opioid withdrawal and cravings, pain, fatigue, and mental health conditions. So maybe you couldn't see a doctor, you couldn't afford your prescription. A lot of people might think it's a good idea to turn to substances like kratom. But if you're struggling with opioid use disorder or other health conditions, just know that these are not a safer treatment option. There are effective treatment options for opioid use disorder, such as Suboxone and methadone treatments that you should choose over these unregulated substances. If you do use kratom, it can lead to abuse, misuse, and even overdose is possible from this substance. So the amount of kratom in and across, different products sold at these gas stations online, it can vary, right? They're not testing every single thing. And sometimes these products can act as a stimulant, speed up your body, or a sedative, make you more sleepy, things like that. And it's just really hard to predict how every person's going to react to taking kratom. Some of the biggest side effects, it can be nausea, dizziness, seizures, and slow breathing, liver problems. Those are the main ones. And a very small number of deaths have been linked to kratom. Those usually involve kratom mixed or taken with other substances like alcohol or opioids or anything like that. So if you mix substances, it's very dangerous. But the good thing to know is that an overdose on kratom can be treated with naloxone, which is an overdose reversal medication. So if you or someone you know uses kratom, overdoses, make sure to call 911. And if you have naloxone, administer that. And that's the best way to respond. So I'm going to turn it over to Sadie to talk about our next substance.
Thank you, Erin. The next one we want to address is Tianeptine, or you may have heard it referred to as Neptune's Fix. That is a brand name that's been in the news lately. It's also referred to as gas station heroin at times. It has been marketed as a dietary supplement, and it's currently legal to purchase, but it is not approved by the FDA for use in the United States. It's structurally similar to tricyclic antidepressants and can bind to opioid receptors to mimic opioid effects. Manufacturers claim it can improve brain function and treat anxiety, depression, opioid use disorder, and other health conditions. So people seek it out as an alternative to opioids, but it can be habit forming. So people who have an opioid use disorder or dependence can be at a higher risk of abusing tianeptine. Withdrawal symptoms are similar to opioid toxicity and withdrawal. Other side effects range from drowsiness and vomiting to confusion, slowed or stopped breathing, and death. In fact, the number of calls to poison control for adverse reactions related to tianeptine has risen dramatically since 2020, which is why you might be seeing more coverage in the news. Overdose can be treated with naloxone. And like Erin said, you always want to call 911 even after administering naloxone. And I will turn it over to Alicia.
Thank you, Sadie. So I get to talk about the third substance, which is Phenibut. And it is currently legal and sold as a dietary supplement that's marketed to help with anxiety, sleep, relaxation, and PTSD. But it is not approved for use in the United States. It's chemically similar to benzodiazepines, which is like Xanax, and it's sometimes marketed as an alternative to it. Without FDA approval, it's not safe to say that it is safer. The reported effects range from feeling calm to blurred thinking, poor motor coordination, depressed breathing, and even psychosis. Research shows there's a risk for dependence and substance use disorder. Death is rare and is associated with using it with other substances. The important thing to remember about this substance is that overdose cannot be treated with naloxone. Your course of action in this case would be to call 911 for emergency services. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Ashley, who's going to just close it out for us.
Thank you, Alicia. And I think it's always safe to call 911 if you suspect someone of having an opioid overdose. It's safe to administer naloxone. This is just a few signs of opioid overdose: pinpoint pupils, faint heartbeat, blue or purple fingernails, if the person can't be woken, or they have slow or shallow breathing, or if you hear gurgling or choking sounds. To view more about how to spot an overdose and how to use Narcan, check out our USU Heart YouTube playlist. And here's again, just talking about these substances. If you're suspecting someone is having an overdose, call 911 and administer naloxone. That's number one. And it's always safest to consult with your physician prior to starting any new supplements. A lot of people might experience a substance use disorder or opioid use disorder throughout their lives. And turning to these substances as a way to cope is not only unregulated, but it might not be safe. Please avoid using these substances and discuss this substance with your doctor or your provider, who can prescribe a safe alternative and medication for your treatment of your substance use disorder. Again, anytime you're starting any herbal supplements or any new routine, it's advised that you talk with your mental and physical health providers and talking with them to make sure that they're a safe alternative for your routine. And they can also help you maintain long-term benefits and effects that you're seeking in your life. Again, always safe to administer naloxone and call 911 if you suspect an overdose of any kind. And I'm just going to close us out with our end message. And if you'd like to learn more about any of this, please see our USU Heart YouTube, like and subscribe our social media accounts here. And on our next slide, we have our disclaimers and brief references. Thank you so much for tuning in to this month's Heart Bunch.